We have our last speaker today, who I'm very proud to introduce, given that he has worked closely with the Center for Biosecurity off and on over the years. For most of the past year, Colonel Randall Larsen was the Executive Director of the Congressional Commission on the Prevention of Weapons of Mass Destruction, Proliferation, and Terrorism. This is the commission, also known as the Graham-Talent Commission, that just issued its final report in January of 2010, and many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with it. Randy has a long and distinguished, decorated career as a military leader, an analyst, an author, a communicator, and has testified before Congress, written extensively, published his own book on these issues, and has worked with the media extensively in past years. His dedication and energy on Homeland Security and national security is actually quite striking, and his work on the Commission in the last year has been extraordinary. So, Randy, welcome.
Since Jeff mentioned his Senator Strom Thurmond story, I got to give you mine. 1994, Senate Armed Services Committee. You know, he always read from the 5x7 cards he was given. He was said, Admiral, do you agree with the administration's sea lift acquisition policy? If the Admiral says he does, then you should ask. And he kept reading the question, and when he got to the end of the follow-up question, everybody was just kind of sitting there trying not to laugh, and the Admiral was very cool, and finally the Admiral leaned forward and he said, Senator, could you repeat that question, please? Well, no one writes my remarks, so I'm speaking for myself. The commission doesn't exist anymore, so I can say whatever I want. We generally did during the past year or whatever. There was great collegiality among the commission, particularly when we were talking about bio issues. But for those of you not aware of it, the commission had two phases. It's the first Congressional Commission to be extended by Congress and paid for a second year because the leaders, bipartisan, Pelosi and Reid and McConnell and Boehner said after World at Risk came out in December 2008, they said this is so important that we want you to extend for a second year and help communicate and try to turn some recommendations into actions. And that's when I came on board last year and did that. And so we released the final report card, and now we're going away. And so like many commissions, we just extend for a second year, so we're lame duck, we're gone. But Senator Graham and Talent thought that the work that's ahead of us, particularly in the field of bio, is so important that thanks to a very generous grant from Paul at the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, on March 1st we stood up as a 501c3 and will continue work. And I want to talk just a couple minutes about that today because the work we're going to do is in the field of education about two aspects of bio. First of all is understanding the threat we face, because I will tell you there's a lot of senior government leaders in this town that really don't get it. I've been working in this field for about 15 years. I'm still bothered by the fact, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And the second thing is the solutions. There are solutions out here to these problems, and DA's right, they're troubling, they're difficult, this panel is talking about, but the fact is the worst thing you can go do to a senior political leader is say, here's a problem. Ooh, scared. That's easy to do, we can all do that. And then they say, well, what's the answer? You say, well, it's complicated. That just doesn't work. We have to be a lot more specific. And you heard some of the specificity today, and I want to talk about some of the things that we're going to help you communicate. Because the real advantage that we have is a lot of people in this town listen to Bob Graham. So we're here to help communicate your message is the number one thing we're going to do. But I tell you what, we live in a town where the acronym WMD to a lot of senior leaders means nuclear. I apologize, I have a hard time with that word. I'm from Texas, okay? I know it's nuclear. They think WMD stands for nuclear. Now, is that hyperbole? No. Go print out the legislation that created the Congressional Commission on the Prevention of Weapons of Mass Destruction, Proliferation, and Terrorism. I should get an award for memorizing that at my age. Okay, you print it out. The words biology or biological do not exist in the legislation that created the WMD Commission. You'll find a lot of nuclear stuff in there. They don't get it. Let me tell you a story about a conversation I had about 5 months ago. I have to be careful because I don't kiss and tell like some people in this town. But so it was a very senior official from inside the building. And I said, do you agree with the WMD Commission's assessment in World at Risk in December 2008? It said bioterrorism is more likely than nuclear terrorism. And this individual said, oh yes, I agree with that. But you know what keeps me awake at night is nuclear terrorism. And as this individual began to expound the answer, then I got it. It was a great flashbulb moment for me, and I hadn't done it. And that's what we got to understand, because we think, because we do this all the time, we get it, and we think the people we're talking to get it, and many of them don't. Because as this individual began talking, everyone gets to the mushroom cloud. Well, I have to be real careful. Sorry about this. We don't have a non-gender specific pronoun, American word. But anyways, this individual said, it became very apparent that bio meant a couple dozen people get sick and 5 die. And we talked about Americans. Well, that's not, I think, what most of us here, and Dee, I'm going to get to your point, because you brought up an interesting point earlier. I'll get to that in a minute. But that's not the scenario that's in the population threat assessment for DHA. It's not the scenario Larry talks about when he goes and gives his briefings from the intelligence community. It's not what President Obama signed in November 2009. It said hundreds of thousands of people and $1 trillion in economic disruption for each event. So I live in a town where it's very highly political, you know, and so some people used to say that bio things what Dick Cheney uses to scare people. Well, okay, I got a document now signed by the President Obama that says the same thing. Hundreds of thousands of people, $1 trillion. Okay, this is a nonpartisan issue. But I'm concerned when I hear very senior people say that. And so when they believe that, what does that mean? Well, like some of the people said on the panel, no one's in charge. That bothers me. Now, maybe I'm a military guy. 32 years in the military. Richard Falkenrath, smart guy, he'll say, this is too complex a thing to have somebody in charge. And I kind of think, let's see, Operation Overlord, the invasion of France in June 44, that's pretty complex. You think you could have told General Eisenhower it's too complex to have a person in charge? I don't think so. But that's a military example. How about VA? You show up in Geneva in 67 and they say, hey, we want you to eradicate smallpox, but nobody's going to be in charge. Or maybe we'll do it like biodefense in America in 2010. More than 24 presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed individual with some responsibility for biodefense, and none of them has it even for a full-time job. And no one's in charge. I'm not sure that's a recipe for success whether you're in the military or not. Certain aspects I see this is a campaign we're in, like some other important campaigns we have false information. No plan, I guess. How would that work on the smallpox eradication, DA? No plan, nobody in charge. What do you think? Of course, you may not know that we're trying to make a movie about DA's experiences, and it's interesting. For those of you who don't know about it, they put him specifically in charge because they thought the program was going to fail and they wanted to be able to blame it on America. But that is, the responsibility, the authority, and the accountability is so important. So that bothers us because we see that the senior leadership in Congress and the administration don't quite get this, the level of people that are working in it compared to previous administrations. It is not the same level. Senator Talent talks about that quite a bit. It's when the Clinton administration first came in, they did it. And then they learned. And so then they brought in people like Kim Bernard, and very senior people in White House Memphis. And then Bush 43 came in, they did it. And then, of course, 9/11 and the American and they got it. And now we see the same trend. But what Senator Graham and Senator Talent think is we don't have time for this learning curve now. It's too great of a threat, and so we have to move forward with this. So the two things that we're going to be focusing our efforts on in education is a better understanding of the threat. One of the things a lot of senior leaders in this town don't understand is the program that the Soviet Union had, their offensive program. Many people don't understand the offensive program the United States had and how powerful that was. Now, my friends at DOD get nervous when I start talking about that, but because there's still lawsuits going on from stuff like that or whatever, and some people say, we don't want to give bad guys, bad ideas. Okay, here's what, if your boss doesn't really kind of get this, just tell them to do a Google search and type in Kuwaiti Professor Anthrax. That's all you do, 3 words. Kuwaiti Professor Anthrax. If your boss hasn't seen that YouTube video, they need to. sitting in a conference just like this in Kuwait in February 2009, and the Kuwaiti professor says, we don't need to hijack a bunch of airplanes. We just need to get somebody weighing 3 or 4 pounds of dry powdered anthrax across the southern border of the United States, take it to Washington, D.C. in front of the White House and throw it up in the air. And the audience laughs when he talks about 100,000 Americans dying. Okay? That's been played on Al Jazeera so many times you can't believe it. And count how many times it's been viewed on YouTube. So it's a serious issue. People don't understand the capabilities that existed. They all believe that was a nation state capability. Yeah, that was 1960s technology. Things have improved just a little bit. So we're concerned about that. I've been giving lectures. The Joint Staff has had me do this since 11 years now. They bring in 125 senior military officers, and I get an hour and 15 minutes with them. Very skeptical people coming in. Oh, God, now we got to go learn about bugs. You know, they like laser-based weapons and all that kind of stuff. Typical military guys, like I used to be. After you present them the facts, it's extraordinary when you get the critiques back about what they have to say about this. So how come no one told us about this? Well, no one told them about it because until about 1994, 1995, it was all top secret. We didn't tell anybody about it. But when people get the facts, and that's what we have to do, is provide them those facts so they'll understand the nature of the threat. If they really understand the nature of the threat, they'll take the actions to give us the priority. That will understand that public health is an incredibly important element of national security in the 21st century. Now, I know a lot of people went up here saying, oh, yeah, we got to fund this public health all the time or whatever. I'm just telling you, when you look in the years ahead, what's going to happen with budget cuts at the federal, state level, you might want to start thinking about protecting a little bit more your public health infrastructure because it's so important part of national defense and national security. Because everyone always kind of puts a fence around that. Well, we'll cut all this other stuff, but we can't cut that. That might be the best strategy for protecting funding for these critically important programs. And by the way, there's many good side benefits from being prepared for these threats. I mentioned the population threat assessment. If your boss has not seen that and has a secret clearance, they should get it. But even the presentation I've been given for 11 years to these senior military officers, I tend to do it at the unclassified level. Because when they leave there, I want them talking about it. Always, if you do half of it classified, half of it unclassified, they're going, okay, now which thing can I talk about? We can provide this, and it's what Senator Graham and Talent are going to be doing a lot of on Capitol Hill, is sitting down and talking to senior members, chairman, committee chairman, and subcommittee chairman to talk about this. And the best way to do it is at the unclassified level, because you can provide them all the stuff. So the strategy is hurt them and heal them. Okay? It's easy to scare them, we can all do that, but then what are these solutions? Well, oh, wait a minute. Now I got to make a change. I got to respond to DA's comments here. A very good point you brought up, DA, earlier this afternoon. Very valid point. It first was brought up in the Gilmore Commission in 1999 when Governor Gilmore and a great staff of people looked at Homeland Security. They said, what should we focus on? Should we focus on this low probability, high consequence, nuke, bio, etc.? Or should we focus on the high probability, low consequence, which I call truck bombs, like 93 World Trade Center, 95 Murrah Building, Oklahoma City? It's a very legitimate debate. It's a debate that goes on today in the Homeland Security community. The traditional first responders, you go up to the FEMA school up at Emmitsburg, they'll say, oh yeah, more people die of fires every year than have ever died of terrorism in America. 5,000 people die of food poisoning. So there is that debate. But here's where I come down on the debate, and I think you need to think about it. And so DA told his side, and so now I'll tell my side. Those small incidents won't change America. Not the America that my kids and grandkids are going to grow up in. We can improve how we respond to small outbreaks of disease, small hurricanes, tornadoes. Unfortunately, because the political stuff is, in Bush 41, there were like 43 emergency declarations. Now we do one about every 3 days. They did one in Ohio a couple years ago, 3 months after the blizzard. So we keep all of the federal people at FEMA and stuff who should be doing planning for what I think are the bigger events because they're just out here running around doing the small stuff. We can improve how we do small stuff, but if we screw that up, we don't change America. I worry about the game changers, the ones that would kill a lot more people than 9/11, the ones that would have enormous economic consequences, just not for that city or region, but for the nation, and the one that Sam Nunn talks about, the one that's a weapon of mass destruction for the U.S. Constitution, where people start losing faith in their government because the government's not responding to a big event. So we can have the debate. It's legitimate to have the debate. I worry about the big one, DA. Now, are we ready to spend all this time on the big one? No. It's like in 1942, a lot of people were trying to convince FDR and General Marshall, we got to invade Europe. Got Nazis in Europe, we got to invade. Well, FDR and General Marshall were pretty sharp guys. They said, you know, I'm not sure we can invade North Africa right now with our capability. So they spent some time preparing for the smaller ones and doing that. And that building block approaches, I think, is a very long way to go. But what that gets us to is what is our long-term strategy? Do we have one as a nation? You know, we talk about all the little pieces here today, and that's important, but how do they all hook together? What is the long-term strategy? That's the number one thing that Senator Graham and Senator Talent want President Obama to do. They would like President Obama to walk up to a microphone and say, America's long-term strategy for biodefense is to remove bioweapons from the category of WMD. We can never as a nation do that for nuclear weapons. We can never harden a city. We can never have a good response. We can never do that. Can we remove bioweapons from the category WMD? 3 of us think we can. A lot of other people I've talked to think, yes, we can. Not at the priority it's being given right now, we can't. It's the only long-term strategy I know, because the capability to launch bioterrorism on America is only going to get, it's only going to get easier. Today it's the toughest and most expensive and difficult it's going to be. It's going to get cheaper, it's going to get easier, and it's going to get more powerful. Now, if we set the priority to make significant improvements in the next decade or two on things like detection and diagnosis, developing and producing vaccines and therapeutics, and delivering them to people, it doesn't make any difference if you make them and get them approved by the FDA if you don't get them in people's mouths and arms. And I mean, I'm shocked. 36% of Americans got the H1N1 vaccine. We're really failing on convincing people to do that. Surge medical capacity and situational awareness is one of my favorite topics that I've heard discussed on several panels today. If we establish that as the national goal, to remove bioweapons from the category WMD, yes, some people will still die. I mean, you know what, we still lose 35,000 in automobiles. We lose 98,000 a year to medical mistakes. Yes, people die. But we'll remove it from that game changer category I was talking about. I think that's a legitimate national goal. And we can reach it only if the President steps forward as the leadership to do that. On one of our breaks today, I saw Christine. Christine, where are you? You still here? Stand up so you can see her. You used to work at the Center for Biosecurity. I'd love to embarrass her. She's a first-year medical student. Now just think, first-year medical student. You know, so she'll graduate 3 more years, and then a long residency, and then maybe a master's in public health, and then 4 or 5 years of experience, and she will be an incredibly valuable asset to America. What's the legacy we're going to give her when she's out there really at the top, the peak of her game? What are we going to give her? Are we going to be moving towards that goal that Senator Graham and Talent want about removing it, bioterrorism from the category WMD? Or are we just going to kind of go along and do a little something over here, a little something over there? You know? That's where our goal should be out there in the long term. Yeah, DA, we got to walk before we run, I agree with you. But it's only going to get more deadly. It's only going to get easier. Yep, I would like it if we could, if next year we could respond to a small anthrax attack in Washington, D.C. That would be nice. That's not the one that keeps me awake, though. So I think it's a great legacy for us to leave the generations that will follow. And that's the one thing you're probably going to get tired of hearing it. You hear Senator Graham or Senator Talent, but we're not going to stop saying it. We think America needs to make it a long-term goal to remove bioterrorism from the category of WMD. Thank you very much. Sure.
Few questions? All right, so the first question is, why the F?
Oh.
On the report card.
I'm the clerk typist, okay? So there was debate. It was very interesting. This was my first commission to serve as an executive director. It was interesting. There was debate amongst the commissioners on the nuclear issues. They were debates about, like, between, should this be a C plus or a D or a C minus, little things. There was virtually no debate on the bio side. But let me be something that I found very interesting, that legislation that didn't have the word biology in it, and then 9 commissioners, 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans, very strong national security credentials, very strong nuke credentials, for most of them credentials, 30 staff members that first year, only 2 had any background in bio, and they were treaty people. Ken Ward, Jonathan Tucker, very nice guys, but primarily treaty. So, in this town, once the narrative kind of gets going a direction, you got the legislation, you got the commissioners, you got the staff, everybody's going towards nuke. After talking to 250 WMD experts, traveling to national labs around the U.S., traveling to several foreign countries, those 9 commissioners came to the unanimous conclusion that bio was the greatest threat to America. That was a significant insight to me. That's what I learned after I joined the commission. What it tells me is if smart people are provided the facts, they'll get it. And that's what we have to do. So did I answer the F question? I mean, there's nobody in charge. When you read the summary, and that was, like I said, there was not a lot of debate. No one's in charge. We don't have a plan, national plan right now. Senator Graham really likes his chain links that we finally made him the graphic he likes now about all those little links in the chain. And he likes to say, hey, one link, whether it's detection or diagnosis or vaccine development or distribution or cleanup. I haven't mentioned Peter Utro's favorite thing, you got to clean this stuff up, in some cases. One weak link can cause that chain to fail. What we're saying is almost all of them are weak. So it wasn't a debate between a D minus and F. It was an F in the opinion of the commissioners.
I think something else you said along the way in the briefing about the report card was that these Fs could be changed. These grades could be improved. They're not intractable problems.
Some of them, and I got to tell you, this is the first time I went to this IOM conference here a couple weeks ago. I was really impressed with the frankness of the debate and the issues, and I get the issues or whatever. And yeah, it's tough. And how are we going to get the private and public sector to work together? But certain things, we said that we could see significant improvements in grades within 3 to 4 months. And the first thing is, we need the president to step up the microphone and say we want to take it off the table as the WMD is the long-term goal. I think it'd be the greatest legacy that President Obama could have, whether he gets 1 term or 2. The advancements we would make, and just think of all those things. What that would mean to public health and what it would mean to your kids and grandkids. Better disease detection and diagnosis, therapeutics, surge capability. Whether we have a bio attack or not, that's all good stuff for my kids and grandkids. We can make big improvements.
One other question. If the FBI's conclusion about who was behind the 2001 anthrax attacks is correct, what does that tell us about the threat of bioterrorism?
Yeah, actually I had an op-ed on that a couple years ago when that first came out. Because for years I've been teaching senior military officers, and they'd say, how about if that Ted Kaczynski guy was a biologist instead of a mathematician? I said, don't worry about that. All the smart people I talk to tell me it would take a team of people to make a sophisticated biological weapon. There couldn't be a single nut there. Well, if the FBI is right, that's even scarier than before, if one person could do it. Of course, not everybody in the world thinks the FBI is right, and we won't go into that. There's issues called chain of custody and whatever. The science is pretty good. I'm still trying to ask the question, why did the FBI close the case just before a 2-year study by the National Academy is being released? But we won't get into that today either. But it is concerning. Could one person do it? I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask that, but it's really frightening. But I think a small team of 4 or 5 could. And we got a lot of briefings on that aren't even at the classified level, totally unclassified about what can be done. I didn't bring my test tube with me today, so.
Well, the day is getting long, and I want to let Randy get off the podium after half hours. Thank you very much, Randy.
Thank you. I do have to say, because okay, two things the press always screws up. Sorry, two things the press always screws up. First of all, they never say the good things that are in there. And one thing that Senator Graham and Talent was so adamant about writing in the report card was all the hard-working people, incredibly dedicated, working in this field. That F was not for them. Now, if you listen to Fox News, the F was for President Obama. That's not what the report card said. It said the F was for America. Executive and legislative branches, federal, state, local level, and the private sector. America's capability. So I would just like to keep the facts right.
Good to know. Thanks, Randy.